Good evening. Welcome to the September 20th, 2018 hearing before the Zoning Board of Appeals. We have 5 applications before us today. The first application is Kevin Keys of 43 Pine Ridge Road, Arlington, Mass. Requests a special permit finding pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 40A, Section 6, and/or Section 810.2 and Section 470.6F of the Scituate zoning bylaw, and/or any relief that the Board of Appeals may deem necessary to raise and reconstruct a pre-existing non-conforming storm-damaged dwelling at 236 Central Avenue, Humrock. Assessors Map 69, Block 1, Parcel 37. Is the applicant before us?
That's David Keys.
I'm sorry, what did I say? I said Kevin? I'm sorry.
That's okay.
David Keys, greetings.
My name is Richard Savant. I work with Senbeck and Taylor. I'm working with the homeowners on this project. As you see, you all got a copy of the plan there. Okay. So, as stated, we've got a severely storm damaged home here, which was damaged last winter, or this spring. What we're proposing here is to raise and reconstruct this home in the same, exactly the same footprint, with the exception of the stairway, because the house is going to be elevated up on driven wooden piles. We require a lengthy stairway to get from the new height down to the ground. But beyond that, it's the exact same footprint of the structure, maintaining all the existing setbacks that are currently there with the existing home. We have been through conservation, received approval there. And like I said, we're just seeking a finding to raise and reconstruct this pre-existing non-conforming structure. I'll answer any questions you might have. I'll do my best.
Darn straight you'll do your best. Let's see. Square footage increases. Any questions from the board?
None.
Any questions from the audience?
None from me. You
Shook his head.
Yeah.
No. Any questions from the audience? Anyone like to speak in favor of the application? Anyone opposed to the application? Do I have a motion?
Motion that the board find in the application of David Keys for the property at 236 Central Ave in Humrock to allow the raise and reconstruction of the dwelling as shown on the plan prepared by Stenbeck and Taylor, dated May 2nd, 2018, and that the board find that said reconstruction will not create any new nonconformities, that to the extent it intensifies any of the existing nonconformities, that such intensification is not substantially more detrimental to the surrounding neighborhood, and further, that the board find that the reconstruction will comply with Section 470.6F of the zoning bylaw.
Second.
And just to note, the plan was revised on June 25th of 2018.
The motion has been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? It is unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice work.
Second hearing before the board.
You want me to take that one?
You sure?
You go sign who's going to do it. I'm trying to get this done fast. Come on, we can do that later. Second application.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Kerry Dowling of 50 Kenneth Road, Scituate, Massachusetts, requests a special permit finding in accordance with the Scituate zoning bylaws, Section 810.2, and/or other relief that the Board of Appeals may grant to construct an addition to a pre-existing non-conforming single-family dwelling at 50 Kenneth Road, Scituate. Assessors Map 40, Block 10, Parcel 9. Mr. Maravito is for the...
I know.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Paul Mirabito from Ross Engineering Company. I'm representing the applicant, Terry Dowling, who owns the property, number 50 Kenneth Road. At present, they have an existing dwelling. On this dwelling, it's the yellow line is the light brown as well as the dark brown. What they're proposing to do is to remove the existing addition in the back, which is in dark brown. And this blue area plus the brown would be a proposed addition. In order to accomplish that, we're showing that the rear setback to the new structure would be 20.3 feet, where the existing is 20.0 feet. But we're also asking to be allowed to extend the right sideline setback of the existing building that's 5.7 feet, which is non-conforming. We're asking to extend that out to the rear approximately another 10 feet and maintain the 5.7 foot side yard setback. The existing area is all impervious area, which will not be covered with a roof. So there's no increase in the impervious area, therefore we don't need to do anything relative to stormwater. So with that, I'll end my presentation. Well, I would add the reasonable use because the lot is non-conforming. It's only 4,976 square feet, and it only has approximately 50 feet of lot frontage. So with that, I'll end and answer any questions you have.
I'll throw out a question just for clarification. You said there was not an increase in
Yeah.
impervious material.
That's correct.
Are we increasing the
This is a
foundation?
This is a paver patio.
Oh,
It's actually around the existing house.
I see.
This is the paver patio. That's paver. This is as well. So the paver patio comes out here and here, and will be covered with a roof.
That confirms my question.
It's lot width we're not conforming to as well, right?
Correct, yes.
Really the reason we're here. right?
Width and,
Frontage.
width and,
But if it was just frontage and area, they wouldn't need to be here, am I correct? Because it's less than 20%.
no, the lot area,
I don't
it's,
believe so.
it doesn't, it has to conform,
The new
setbacks have to
construction needs
conform.
to conform to
Ah, you-
setbacks.
correct, I got you.
District,
This is the 5.7.
As well as the
Yeah.
20%.
but there's nothing they can do about the lot width or the,
No,
Area.
no, the neighbors would have something to say about that.
yeah, it just doesn't. So the lot width's 50, where 100's required because it's R3, but it's just not on the zoning chart, I don't think, on the plan.
Yeah, no, it's-
very frequently, frontage and width are going to be similar.
Right,
Occasionally
Especially-
it's not, but
especially down there.
any other questions?
Just as it relates to the addition, is it going to be the same roof line, same height? Or is it,
Well, the height will be within the allowed height limit under the zoning bylaw.
okay. I just didn't know if it was going to be 2 stories, 1 story, or what's,
2 stories.
okay.
But you're only increasing the living area by 13%? Am I correct? Is that,
The gross floor area,
correct? You're going from 1203 to 1365?
we don't have an increase of 20%.
No, 13.5% you've indicated. So the existing structure is, you're basically extending the roof line on the existing structure. You're not going up, you're not increasing a second floor. is basically a,
2 additions. it looks like.
call it a ranch with a, just extending it, filling out the back with a little bit dimensionally. Just increasing you're squaring off the back end
Yes,
dimensionally.
yeah,
The
exactly.
roof line will just extend over the new addition
Right.
and be consistent with the, yeah.
Yeah.
Any questions from the audience? Bob, any concerns?
Bill?
Anyone like to speak in favor? Opposed? Motion?
Motion that the board find on the application of Kerry Dowlin for the property at 50 Kenneth Road to allow the addition as shown on the plan drawn by Ross Engineering and dated April 10th of 2018, that the proposed addition will not create any new nonconformities, and that to the extent it increases any existing nonconformities, such increase or intensification will not be substantially more detrimental to the surrounding neighborhood.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? None? Unanimous vote? Thank you.
I got that one.
What are we coming up to leave me?
You gotta do a signed one, you don't have a form for that. Actually, you probably do. I don't.
The third application is Chief John Murphy of the Scituate Fire Department, 800 Chief Justice Cushing Highway, Scituate, Mass. Requests a special permit pursuant to Section 710.5E of the Scituate zoning bylaw to allow the utilization of an electronic signboard for the public safety information dissemination located in front of the Public Safety Building at 800 Chief Justice Cushing Highway, Scituate, Mass. Assessors Map 25, Block 1, Parcel 1, as predetermined during construction.
There you go.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
You're not represented by counsel?
No. Couldn't afford them.
We're not gonna have to argue about whether or not the fire department supports this one. That's nice for a change.
You might have to ask for a formal letter, though.
It's where we get into trouble on some of the other ones.
So good evening, I appreciate your time. So the information I just gave you basically gives you some reasons why we believe an electric signboard would be good for the town of Scituate, especially when it comes to emergency management and fire and police safety. The sign would be in front of the public safety complex at 800 Chief Justice Cushing Highway, as I said earlier. We actually have run conduit out from our dispatch center. There is a junction box out in front of the building where we feel the best sight distance for the property would be, set off back far enough off of Route 3A and not to hinder any sight distance for our apparatus of police cruisers and also pedestrian crossing and walking by. We're encouraged by emergency management, MEMA, in our state, and try to get as much information out, especially during these storms. And as we all know, Scituate is impacted by coastal storms probably more than anybody in the East Coast. So we feel we do a good job with information for social media, email, television, but not everybody does use that type of information dissemination. So we feel a signboard on 3A would be effective for many things, especially emergency management and police and fire emergencies, as well as some town information that is often used right now with a sort of a portable signboard, an orange signboard, that we don't think that's attractive. This would be on 3A, which is our main road going through town, to try to capture the bulk of the people driving through town, whether it's visitors, people passing through, or town residents. So we do have also, this is funded through the Public Building Committee for the building, but also a $10,000 donation for Columbia Gas for this specific reason. So this is what we're proposing.
Can they afford it?
Needed it clear?
They already
Has it
got the
cleared?
money. They got the
Good.
money last year, so.
It's nice to see that they were making donations last year when their goodwill was
so they
a
may be out of
good.
dough now, but we already got the check. So we just feel it'd be a good situation. They're becoming quite common in different towns. I think that if they use effectively, concisely, we can get messages out that we need to get out, whether it's, pending thunderstorms, evacuations. You're looking at North Carolina right now, there's over 600 roads closed, how to get to different places. It could happen anywhere. We get the nor'easters, but doesn't say we can't get a hurricane someday with 24 inches of rain. So the more information we can get out, I believe the better for public safety as well as other town uses. So this is the location we propose. It will be controlled electronically from our dispatch through our command staff.
Could you just give us a little bit of an idea exactly where it's going on the site? How close to 3A? That's the only thing I didn't
Okay,
gather.
so if
from
you're
that.
looking at the main building itself, the main entrance, probably about 15, 20 feet to the south, there's a junction box there. And there's sort of off the road, there is a sort of a wooden guardrail. So between the guardrail and the street, it'll probably set off about 15 feet off the street, the closest edge, and then going towards the guardrail. There's a junction box there, so we have a little bit of leeway with that wiring, but we want to make it far enough off the street, but close enough where it can be effectively seen. And we have a nice location we feel, we've been out there several times and marked the best area that we thought would be effective to A, be able to see it, and B, not to block the apparatus view coming out of the station or the cruiser's view, and also for pedestrian access.
So it would be between main lot and
Yeah,
the
so-
entrance to the station?
So it's right in front, if you're going by in 3A, and you see the fire apparatus, the 3 bays, and then next to that, there's a main entrance to the middle of the building. Then there's an emergency operations center exit. The main entrance to the middle of the building, I would say about, the center of this would probably be about 10 to 12 feet south of that. That's
Toward
what-
main lot?
Toward Midland, yes.
Okay.
It would be built so it would be double-sided. You can see it from the north and the south, be the exact same message all the time.
We do have we did receive communication from the planning board dated the 18th, stating the planning board offers the following recommendations. Review by the Traffic Rules and Regulations Committee. Review by the Design Review Committee of a scaled-down sign keeping with the rest of the building. And planning board members questioning the viability of an internally lit sign.
The viability of all the views there.
I'm not sure that I fully understand it, but Mrs. Burbine is here, so perhaps she would like to comment on the letter.
We are concerned about internally lit signs. That is a rather congested area up there between Main Lot and Route 3A. I just spoke with the chief about this. The members are not really enamored of having a digital sign. We're wondering, is there any possibility that it could be similar to the lettering that you have out here at the high school? But I understand the need of it. It's just that, is this setting a precedent for this type of signage on Route 3A?
Just to comment on that for a second, because that goes to a concern that I speak to a lot on this board. I don't think it's setting a precedent whatsoever. When we're granting a special permit, and if my fellow board members could correct me, we would be granting a special permit for this sign, am I correct?
Yes.
When we're granting a special permit, that is in every respect specific to the detriment to the neighborhood versus the value to the neighborhood, because I view it as a net detriment to a neighborhood. So obviously, it's hard to say that a sign for these purposes would be, as a whole, detrimental to a neighborhood. And I don't view that an applicant gets to come in here and say, you did this next door, so you need to allow it here. That's not the way it works. It's characteristics of a site, detriment to the neighborhood, the need, all of that gets weighed. And so I don't view in any way, shape, or form that allowing an electronic sign for this purpose means someone gets to have it on a different lot for a different purpose.
I understand that.
Yes.
I mean, I do know that the Scituate Chamber of Commerce would like to do the very same thing.
And
They'd have to come before you.
They would indeed, and if they showed me the same public purpose and need, I would view it with the same deference. For better or worse, they'd probably have a hard time doing that. And, you know, just to speak to your lettering out here, I'm sure the chief could speak better to it than I, but if there's ever going to be a time where we need a sign that's digital, that can be changed at a moment's notice, that has the ability to show whatever you can't even imagine yet, I think this is gonna be that time. So I think I would feel pretty strongly that it is the type of sign. I don't want to have someone running out there in the middle of a storm to change something and worrying about whether they have enough teas or something.
We have enough to do during a storm. I also want to say,
I'm not speaking in opposition to this.
I understand.
We simply asked for clarification on the comments of the board, and we appreciate that.
no, and I appreciate your comments, I do really, and we've talked about this. I do want to say, there's no houses no homes that can see this from their home, right on 3A. And I believe it is far south enough, and I do appreciate the concern of man lot in 3A. It's a tough intersection, I believe that, and I know it is, I come out there a lot. But I believe this is far enough down south, to the north, that it's far enough away from the intersection that you're not gonna start to read the sign until you're well past Man Lot Road. And the sight distance of this, I think, is fair enough for people, the cars to see it. No homes are impacted by this, and again, this is something that we could have, all of a sudden, we have a thunder squalls going through last week in Saugus, they had a downburst, you know, you don't know what we're gonna need, and we have a lot going on, and a lot of things change during these storms. That we get frequently. We want to let people know that roads are closed. You'd be coming home from work, all of a sudden, you know, hey, turn on Oceanside, all these roads are closed, blah, 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 or we're turning the lights off in these areas. So there's a lot of information we can get out that we feel is life safety, that we can help. And again, we're encouraged by MEMA to disseminate as much information as we can, and this is one of the models that they support.
Would this sign be used 24/7? Would there always be something on there?
We could do it just during the day, in the early evening, that could be something, and if there were concerns, all of a sudden, listen, we don't like it on at night, this, whatever it is, but if we feel the information in an emergency, it would probably be up, but there's other times
Right.
that we could turn it off, say.
Or in anticipation of a storm
Yeah,
preparedness
I
notices?
think
But
we
what I
do
was
that.
wondering is, you know, on a night like tonight, is there just gonna be some sort of, you know,
I think, Tom, that's open for people to have input on if they want to say, listen, we want that off at 9 at night unless it's imperative. Or we can say, listen, you know, you might have, you know, there might be a town meeting coming up or something like that. I mean, most of the traffic is done, I
Right.
think, by 9:30 at night. So I don't think it has to stay on all night. That's something we would work with if that was a concern for the people.
yeah, I just didn't know if that was the plan, if it was,
It's
besides
a good question. It's a good
Scituate
question.
Fire and Scituate Police, would there be other town messages that would be put on
You know,
there?
we could do that. It's primarily public safety, emergency management, but if the town sees a need fit, that, listen, we want to let people know there's an election coming up, or there's a town meeting coming up, by all means, that could be used for that, instead of bringing a portable board out in front of town hall or somewhere else. That would be an effective message for all these listed and then some. We want to make sure it's built tastefully as possible. We want to have a nice casement around it, and with a town seal on top to make sure it's very attractive. It sort of fits the same attraction as the building itself, so. A lot of thought's gone into this, and we just want to try to provide as much information to the town as we can, especially during difficult times.
I think that,
Let's see if
If-
there's anyone else to make a comment.
yeah.
Is there anyone else in the audience who has a comment? Yes, ma'am. If you could just state your name and address for the record.
Cindy Olson, Gannett Pasture Lane. I have a number of questions based around the value of the sign that we'll be getting versus I feel it will be a detriment to the town. I don't think it's consistent with our town values. I don't think it's consistent with the green corridor that we have going through 3A. And so I'm wondering, maybe you know all of this, and one of my questions is, how large is the sign?
The sign itself, the screen will be 3 feet 2 inches high, 7 feet 10 inches wide.
And what is the orientation? Does it run perpendicular to the road?
Runs perpendicular to the road. It'll be two-sided sign for the north and south both to view.
And how much information can be put on this sign? And the reason I'm asking that question is Is there enough words that can be put on the sign to make it of value versus having a large flashing light on the street at all time?
The light on the street only flashes when the fire department exits the building.
The sign, does the sign flash? Are the words in the sign flashing?
No, it's not gonna flash unless you really does say, listen, immediately get out of the way, we have a tornado coming, but obviously, no, it's not. And you wanna have your message concise. You wanna make
Yeah.
it clear, so somebody driving at 50 miles an hour is be able to read it and not take the focus off the road. So we wanna be smart about that, and that's, obviously it's fire and police, we wanna make sure nobody's gonna get in an accident for this, we wanna make sure our wording is concise, it's clear and impactful.
What are the colors of the sign?
You can have any color you want, but we wanna keep things sort of basically clear, probably white and black when we're sending messages out, but the sign does have the capability to do other colors.
Because that is a problem for, one thing, people that are colorblind, that you have to keep that in mind
Yeah,
going
we don't-
forward. But the real reason is night vision. People that are driving down the road, if they're faced with something that's very bright, and I understand we have to actually see it to have it of any use, but that's gonna screw up people's night vision when they're going by.
I believe they have a night and a day setting, so you can see it during the day and it's dimmed down at night, so it's not gonna be real bright and sticking out like that, so that's definitely a concern of ours that we would make that adjustment.
And my other concern that was already discussed was if the sign would be on all night or not. Is that in the written documentation for the sign, that it would be turned off unless it's for use in emergencies?
If there's no use for the sign, we can turn it off. If there's use for the sign, emergency, for the town reasons or whatever, we can turn this off when needed.
Yeah.
We could say, listen, after 9 o'clock, this is off unless we got an emergency situation going on, so we're flexible with that.
Is that in writing?
I'll give you my word.
I don't think it's necessary that it be in writing. I think we have many applications that come before us that are presented, and we ask the questions, and we are thoughtful of the applicant and the answers, and then we try to incorporate that into applying our bylaws in a fair way.
Yeah, I just don't want to get into a situation where
Well,
we forget about this conversation.
No.
I don't think that's on the table here.
Yeah, I think if there's ever a situation where someone wants to be a good neighbor, it's going to be your fire and police department.
Yeah, and the last thing that I was thinking about in terms of this situation is the money that we're spending on the sign. I would much rather see it be used for safety equipment for police and fire. More Narcan, more training, more equipment, computer upgrades are saving as a portion for computer upgrades. I just feel like the expense of this is not worth what we're getting, and I would rather see that be given to the police and firefighters for, like I say, equipment, K-9, the K-9 program, anything really.
We've been able to get about $600,000 in grants over the last 3 years towards equipment for the fire department. So I think we're doing well with our equipment as far as the capital expenditures also. If we do not do this sign, I give the town $10,000 back to Columbia Gas, which they donated to us for the sign specifically. So I think that's a generous donation for them, but if we don't use it for this, it's going back to the gas company.
Will that cover the entire cost of the sign?
It will not. It'll cover about a third of it.
And where is the rest coming from?
The Public Building Committee has voted this in support of this, and they see the value of this sign, so they oversee all the expenditures of the, everything that goes on in the public safety complex.
And typically, this is not an interrogation. This is basically the public asks questions through the board. We're being very relaxed here because we aren't a big crowd, and
Thank
but
you.
just be thoughtful of that.
Yeah.
Anyone else like to speak? I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Number one, I don't know why you're here, to be very candid. One of our bylaws, 710.5F, says, E, says, "Nothing herein shall be construed to prohibit the placement within the town of Scituate of street signs, traffic signs, directional signs, or any other governmental authority or agency signs."
I'm aware of that, but it's out of respect.
I appreciate that.
For your board and for the town, that I want to go through the proper channels and make sure it's vetted properly, and I want to get your input and feedback, and so I want to make sure I'm respectful of that.
I appreciate that.
Thank you, and I think that maybe to speak to the planning board's concerns about us approving signs that maybe fall out of the guidelines, I might be inclined to make a motion that the board find that this sign should be allowed under that section.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
I would entertain that. I think by way of input, and I do appreciate you coming forward, Chief, that's, your application, as stated in the public notice, says an electronic signboard for public safety information dissemination. It would seem to me that doesn't necessarily mean, season's greetings.
No.
I mean, I think and frankly, I think less is more. It should be illuminated and display something when it's important public safety issues. And I'm guessing that may be the intent.
I kind of echo that, and the reason I was asking, because I think it'd be important if that sign's lit, residents know that there's some sort of issue, but if you keep that lit every day, people are just gonna drive by it and not see it, but if that's lit and people are driving by, it's gonna raise a concern, they're gonna know, and it's gonna actually provide information, otherwise,
If it doesn't, Tom, I agree, it's vanilla.
Yeah, it's like driving by the Welcome to Scituate sign. How many times, I bet you can't even tell me what it says on the sign now, because you just drive by it so many times because it's always there.
Doesn't it say Cliff Hotel?
Right. But when you have a sign that, is only on certain times to deliver certain messages, it's something that I think
Yeah.
would actually deliver the message than rather just be, a billboard.
You're right, it'd be more impactful, and I just hope that certain people aren't looking at this to try to block a sign from someone else down the street, that they can oversee the importance of this, but they don't want to set a precedence, and so I hope that's not the reason that people would deter from this sign.
Along the same thought, on the Driftway, near the recycling center, we have had a portable sign periodically for, I would say, public information, public safety, such as, even though it may be the parade route has to change, or no parking in the harbor, that's public safety. That's essential to limit traffic congestion in the harbor district. That sign is portable. Do you know who handles that sign, or where?
DPW owns that sign.
That's
and
DPW.
They relocate sometimes in front of town hall for, say, town meetings or whatever it is, taxes due, and it's not down the Driftway. A lot of people come in the Driftway as well.
Mhm.
So, I agree 100% that this is not a sign just to be lit every day, put something up to put something up. We want to make sure it's an impactful message. If the town needs messages out for other reasons, town meeting, whatever it is, we're open to that. And I think we're open to also at nighttime, unless we have a real impactful message, there's no need to have it on. But we feel the information to disseminate, because not everybody does social media, email, and we figure we can impact a lot of people on 3A, the most bang for our buck in the location of the public safety complex, and controlled through wiring and dispatch, I think is the most effective way.
I can speak to that. I teach middle school in Marshfield, and we have a sign outside, and there's an effort to pull up the right letters and get them out there, and a great deal of effort is made to make sure the sign is meaningful, but it's a whole nother thing. It's a different issue, like our sign we have here for the high school. It's great to be able to advise parents and guardians and the community in general of things that are going on at the high school, but the time involved to change that sign is significant. They're not
sometimes-
necessarily timely messages.
Sometimes things happen quick.
The ability for you to be down in the harbor and decide that we're closing a street, and for it to appear minutes later on that sign,
We can make a
sounds
right.
quite good to me,
I
yeah.
call the radio to dispatch right away. I mean, look,
Yeah,
it just happened on
that's-
the North
that's
Shore. I
something.
mean, if we had even a smaller event like that on the North Shore, never mind our storms, but stuff happens quick. And we want to make sure we get the right information out as much as we can through social media, through email, and also through this type of venue.
If
Is there
we're
any
good.
other comments? Bob?
No, I think you've covered it, and, I think that section 710 is, if I'm quoting that correctly, is smack on in the. to be applied to this
710(5)(e).
situation. Yeah.
You say in the application, Chief, that the, as predetermined during construction, so obviously you're somewhat open to the colors and other,
Oh, yeah, we did
Things
go
like
to the
that.
design review committee once, and they requested to see again. I invited them up to the station to actually see where the location would be. Unfortunately, it got canceled at the last minute, but I'm happy to host them as well. As far as the aesthetics of this, and design of this, I'm open, we have a design here, but if somebody thinks it should be changed a little bit and they have a better idea, I'm open to that.
And I think in light of the planning board's letter, a review of traffic by Traffic Rules and Regulations Committee, obviously running it by them, I don't imagine that's a big challenge to do.
Yeah, we have a fire captain and there's a fire deputy police chief on that board, and I know they support it 100%, but I'd be happy to go if that's what's necessary.
And likewise, the Design Review Committee have already indicated you've spoken to them about that, and the planning board members have expressed their concern about internally lighted and whether it's,
And I did first bring this
That's
to the
appropriate,
planning
so.
board, just to give them, again, respect to all the boards, to make sure I could bring this in front of everybody and have the thoughts and concerns and make sure we put the best product and effective use out there.
I would be hesitant to make set any kind of limits on it, for example, trying to define what is public safety or what is, so
I think that should be in the,
that having been said,
under the purview of a fire and police chief, I think would be the best people to make that decision.
so that having been said, I'd entertain a motion.
I'd make a motion that the board find on the application of the Scituate Fire Department, am I correct, on behalf of the entire public safety building in the town, that the board find that the sign proposed in the application would fall under Scituate zoning bylaw, section 710.5E, and therefore be allowed as of right.
Second.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is a vote.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Appreciate you taking into consideration the board and also the
Thank you very much.
comments of the public. It's a great opportunity.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Chief, one more copy of that email that you gave them.
Sure.
Thank you, just for
Do you have one already? Excellent.
I have one right here.
your time. Thank you.
We write up a finder?
Yeah, we have to think of, I'll do it. Something.
I don't think, I've never written up just a finding.
No, I have actually.
I don't even, what do you just gotta find that or
I'm not saying we shouldn't, I'm just saying I've
Just
never done
that we met.
No, yeah.
That we found that the board heard evidence. and
Permitted by right.
Found that.
It goes into the file, we just don't record it, right?
I don't think it needs to be
Think it's
recorded.
Uh-oh.
Our fifth application.
in 2 minutes.
Fifth application is Douglas Smith of 1 Cole Parkway, Scituate, requests the finding in accordance with Scituate zoning bylaws, section 820, 950.2D, and/or Mass General Laws, chapter 48, section 6, and/or any other relief that the Board of Appeals may grant to authorize the change of the pre-existing non-conforming use of 1 Cole Parkway, Assessors Map 50, Parcel 7, Block 7, Parcel 23, to a specified use not substantially different in character and not substantially more detrimental or injurious to the neighborhood than the existing non-conforming uses.
Okay, all right, so Jeff DeLisi, I represent the applicant. This building is the bowling alley in the harbor. The bowling alley has been owned by my client, Doug Smith, for a couple of decades now, I think since 1985. Doug's with me today along with, excuse me, along with his wife. And essentially, what Doug's seeking to do is to convert his office, which is on the 3rd floor of the building, to a residential apartment, which he will use as the proprietor of the building. I sent correspondence to the board with my application, which indicated the reason why we need to seek this permit, and also specified that the uses in the building are conforming. I was incorrect in that, insofar as the bowling alley use in the harbor is not permitted. Whereas this particular bowling alley has been utilized since the 1930s or 40s it shows actually on a record plan in your, in the filing as a bowling alley in as early as 1940, which pre-exists the date of the adoption of zoning in the town. So what we're seeking to do is essentially just to allow Mr. and Mrs. Smith to use the third floor as their home. And I was going through the zoning bylaw, the use, or Mr. Smith's ownership of this property pre-exists the date of the adoption of the parking requirements in the harbor. And essentially, the office space, if the parking requirements were to be required, would demand 5 parking spaces, the office portion of this building alone. And essentially what he's doing is he's foregoing that to a residential use which requires a demand of only 2 parking spaces. So essentially this entire building, there's no exterior work that is being proposed here. The entire building is located on the entire lot, pretty much. And so we're just seeking a finding from the board to change the pre-existing non-conforming bowling and parking uses of the property to allow for the use of a dwelling apartment by the owner.
In addition to the existing
Bowling alley, hardware
and
store, and in the rear is the coffee corner.
shop,
Yeah, so,
which are the coffee shop and the hardware store are conforming uses in the zone.
that's correct, yeah.
I still don't understand why you're here.
Is
I'm
it
sorry.
residence and non-conforming use in the zone?
Excuse me?
Is it residence and non-conforming use?
Residence is a conforming use, but I went over it with Bob, and we thought in an abundance of caution, we should ask the board for relief on this particular issue.
And so, I guess first, and I don't disagree, this isn't a single-family detached dwelling. It's certainly not a two-family dwelling.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a multifamily dwelling. Is this an accessory dwelling or a residential accessory use?
It's neither, you can't be a residential accessory use unless you have a.
Right, a
residential
resident.
Residence.
Is this an accessory dwelling?
No, because there's
No.
no primary
No,
dwelling.
because there's no primary.
Well, but the code sort of states that there can be an accessory dwelling to a business use.
Correct.
Okay.
And those
If
do
that's the
exist.
case, you need a special permit based on one section of the code, which has contradicted itself before, and I think the planning board is the special permit granting authority.
For the accessory dwelling.
If accessory dwellings fall under 530, the planning board's the special permit granting authority. Now, at the same time, a single-family detached dwelling is allowed in the Harbor Business District, so why wouldn't a single-family attached dwelling? It doesn't say that a single-family attached dwelling is not allowed, it's just not in the table of use regulations.
Yeah, so you put your finger right on the pulse of the whole conundrum that I was in my discussion with Bob as to whether or not this is a special permit requirement or a zoning issue or no issue at all. And I disagree that it's a special permit requirement for the planning board. This is a use, the parking aspect of this use alone is pre-existing non-conforming. And that's probably, if you step back and you think about the property in its entirety, that's, if there's any offense to the neighborhood about any of the uses there, it would be the fact that there's a bit of a lack of parking in the harbor. And so my feeling is that there's enough of a non-conforming use to justify doing this by the utilization of a finding pursuant to section 820, or section, is it 820? The pre-existing non-conforming finding section of the zoning bylaw, section 820. I think that there's enough there to justify it, but it was that specific issue as to why we were like, well, this sounds to me to not be so difficult or complex as to require a special permit. I think that it could be done in various ways. This is one of them, and this is the avenue I've chosen.
So what, in a perfect world, what would we find?
You would find that the existing office use on the third floor of the building pre-exists the parking requirements of the zoning bylaw.
Okay.
And that the building contains a bowling alley, which is a pre-existing non-conforming use.
Still with you.
Okay, and that what we're seeking to do is to expand that use by allowing the third floor to be utilized as a residence for the owner of the building.
So that sounds good to me. I wish I could act in ignoring the code, but people would frown upon that. Where you lose me is where the code says that a dwelling's allowed inside a business building in the Harbor Business District. I think it's a flaw of the code. I think that how could you possibly not want to allow a single-family attached dwelling when you allow a single-family or two-family dwelling? And if it wasn't for 530, I could probably get with you that we're here to fill in the gaps in the code.
Mm-hmm.
But with 530 there, as much as I might like to, I'm cautious for us to find or grant anything where I think there's a pretty good argument that the code says you should be before the planning board.
But the converse argument would apply to that, right? So the converse argument is there a pre-existing non-conforming use in this building? And the answer is yes.
Absolutely.
And the owner is seeking to expand that use, and section 820 allows you to do that.
But there isn't a dwelling in the building now.
But there could be. I mean, you
See, that's where you lost me. I think that there could be by special permit.
So utilizing a couch in the office where it has separate water service, wouldn't that be a dwelling in a sense?
If someone had been making it their primary residence up to this point, then there would be a dwelling in there already, absolutely.
And a dwelling is an allowed use in the district.
An accessory dwelling is allowed by special permit granted by the planning board. A single-family detached dwelling is allowed in the district.
Does it say detached, or is
It does say detached. I think it's ridiculous that it says detached, but it says detached. No offense to if the person's alive that drafted that provision, but
This was an issue that Bob and I discussed, and we
And
wanted to.
as you know as well as anyone in this room or who's not in this room, people like to complain about stuff like this, whether it means something to them or not. I'd just as soon we do this in a way where someone doesn't have a legitimate gripe. Am I going down the rabbit hole here, or are you guys with me? Please interrupt.
I would, here's a challenge, Jeff. The
Mhm.
accessory dwelling definition is pretty clear. An accessory dwelling is a separate housekeeping unit, complete with its own sleeping, cooking, and sanitary facilities that is substantially contained within a structure of a single-family dwelling. And that's where I was stopping, but it states a structure accessory thereto or a business structure, but functions as a separate unit. So the definition is pretty clear. think we have to call this an accessory dwelling. I was trying to think if we could call the dwelling the detached dwelling with an accessory allowed pre-existing use of a bowling alley and, kind of a reverse way of looking at it.
I can't imagine a way that these folks shouldn't be allowed to put a single-family dwelling above the bowling alley. They could change it to apartments under the code, but
They could
I
change
also think the
bowling.
code says the planning board's the one that has to bless it.
I was just looking at the table of uses too, where it says accessory dwelling subject to
That's where I
530.
started my
SB.
adventure that's
Yeah.
ruining Jeff's day.
Yeah, no. This is something that.
Yeah,
again,
no, I know.
That we discussed. I think that there are two avenues to do this, and that's really where the difference is here. I think you can do a straight-up Section 820 finding. I recognize that there's specific language in the bylaw contrary to that, which gives you the option to do to go a different route. And I would venture to say that, when you look at, for instance, when you take a look of the zoning bylaw as a whole, and you look at the definition of residential accessory use, I think it is, which talks about offices, business offices and homes in residential districts, or something to that effect. The drafters of this bylaw would never expect bowling alley as an accessory use to an apartment. It's like you can't topsy-turvy it and go the other way. So I just think that there are two different avenues to achieve this objective. And the way I've chosen to do it is one avenue. And the way you just described, Anthony, would be the other avenue.
Yeah.
And so I would challenge the board to explain to me why you can't do it pursuant to a change of pre-existing non-conforming use. And it'd be nice to know that, and maybe I'm pushing you too much, and if I am, let me know, and I'll withdraw the application and we'll go to the planning board.
I just don't know, I can't put into words I'm happy to find that what they're gonna do isn't substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the non-conforming uses that they have now, but I don't think it's even up for discussion that that's not an acceptable way to change uses under the code.
You're not changing, well,
This is a new use, so I don't think you have any grandfathering or pre-existing non-conforming protection here.
so if I were to go to the planning board, I would have to call this building a detached dwelling, the entire building, right?
No, it's a business.
No, it's a business.
It's a business in which you wish to create an accessory dwelling.
And I don't, the code isn't even
business
clear
structure,
to me.
But
At
Another-
least 2 private off-street parking spaces shall be available for use by the occupants, which you're gonna have. I think it would be a pretty quick, as quick as anything could be, but
the other way to look at it, though, is that special permit procedure for accessory dwellings is not changing a non-conforming use. We have a non-conforming use here in this structure.
yes.
So that's where you're
That's
coming on
my
with the
alternative
820,
argument, yeah.
is we're changing a non-conforming use to a less restrictive, or
No, 'cause I think
So where,
not a more detrimental.
you're asking
or
us to
injurious.
find that
The office and
the use, the ambiguous use is non-conforming. So you're gonna change it to a use that is less non-conforming.
Or no more.
Less
Oh, I think you're-
detrimental in its
More-
You're
non-conforming
saying
nature.
they're both conforming.
Not substantially more detrimental to neighborhood. The bowling alley is a non-conforming use.
The
in
office
zoning
is conforming.
The office portion of the building is conforming.
And then the
but
residential use-
It's not separate from the bowling alley. It's part of the bowling alley.
Yeah.
It's the bowling alley's office.
Okay.
Right.
So this is part of the non-conforming use. This is the bowling alley, which was made to be non-conforming, I might add, when the bylaw was recodified in like 2012. I mean, it was very, very newly identified. That's why I missed it when I wrote the letter. But that's your non-conforming use, is the fact that the bowling alley, this is the bowling alley's office, essentially. It's not separate, it's on a separate floor,
Okay.
but it's not separated off by any means. So I think that you could change that by putting the owners, it's almost, in a sense, that's the other thing too, is that we're not seeking a separate dwelling unit for like condominium purpose. This is the owner.
I'm totally with you, and if I'm with you that we could even say that this is an extension of the bowling alley use, so that these folks can continue to run their bowling alley. But it's still hard for me to get around that the code anticipates a business owner living in the building that houses their business, and 530 was drafted with that in mind.
I was thinking like even if it was like a bank or something like that, that was permitted use, and then you tried to carve off part of that to make it an accessory,
It's an accessory, the
you still,
code,
you gotta
the
go to
code
special
speaks to
permit.
that.
So
I
the
think
fact
you
that it's
gotta go to the planning
non-conforming,
board.
I don't think that it changes.
Yeah, I think I don't know why the code was drafted, so you have to go to the planning board?
It's not substantially more detrimental or injurious to the neighborhood than the existing non-conforming use. That's the standard. The bowling alley use also pre-exists the date of the adoption of the requirement for a special permit for accessory dwelling as well. But I
Yeah.
recognize the fact that
You're asking to put an accessory
Now.
dwelling in there now.
I get that,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
If there was already one there and you wanted to make it bigger, I think that's where we come into play, but.
What's crazy is that if you were putting 2 apartments in it, you wouldn't have to go to the planning board, right? Would that be
It wouldn't be an accessory dwelling.
it would be a 2-family dwelling or a multifamily dwelling, and we could do it.
I'm
Right?
not sure that's true.
Okay.
I know there's
I don't-
3 or maybe 4 apartments up over the building that used to be Goddard's.
Oh, no, multifamily's
And
not.
those were permitted as accessory dwellings by the planning board.
Yeah, I
I'd like to save you the trouble of having to go to another board, but I do think you probably, I mean, we
I'm
could
laughing-
find,
I'm laughing to myself because we just saw the letter from the planning board on this public safety sign.
I hear
So
you.
you can just imagine going in on this particular issue. I think there are 2 avenues, and, you know, if somebody comes forward and appeals a decision allowing a change in a pre-existing non-conforming use such as this is, you know, then I would be applying to the planning board. But I tend to think that no one in this particular harbor business district would even know that there's a dwelling there. And
We're telling them.
when the decision becomes final, Bob can issue a building permit. And I still don't know why you can't change it under section 820.
Harbor business.
HB, it's HB.
Right, I know, I understand, but I'm guessing.
Yeah,
I'm trying to get to the slippery slope, to be honest. If something is non-conforming in the Harbor Business District, and they came to it, which in fact the bowling alley is, because it's not listed
Sure.
as conforming. It's not listed as allowed. But a commercial kennel can't be in the harbor business, If there were one there today, and they had space, and they wanted to put a apartment above the commercial kennel, by the argument you're making, then they would be allowed to do that.
Yeah, if they wanted to convert the commercial kennel's office into a dwelling, the argument I'm making is they could.
So,
For
as long
instance,
as we don't have any registered marijuana dispensaries, commercial kennels.
an indoor theater isn't allowed in the Harbor Business District. If you brought us to say
But it's conforming because we permitted it.
that one, but if you said, listen, there's typically 30 people in the bowling alley, and we're gonna open a theater for 25 people at max, we'd find that that's not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood, the change of the non-conforming use, right?
Right.
You would probably engage yourself in a powers test thing where you guys are trying to figure out, how the demands on the neighborhood
100%.
change and so forth.
Here's the distinction for this. The code anticipates the change that you're making and says that it's the planning board's call.
In one area, and in another area, the code anticipates that we can go in this avenue and have it done by a finding, a change in a pre-existing non-conforming use. I'm with you. The code anticipates your way,
Yeah.
and it anticipates my way.
I think it anticipates your way for other non-conforming uses. I don't think the apartment that your clients are trying to put in is a non-conforming use.
And I respect that.
No, thank you.
I mean, I have no
appreciate it.
choice but to respect it, but I do
No,
respect it.
no, and I understand your avenue and your motivations, and it all makes sense to me. I absolutely may have done the same thing. And to be honest, I wish we could go your way.
Well, you
And-
still might. I mean,
Well, absolutely. I wish I saw it exactly your way, may be a better way to say it. And I would support a planning board application for this.
Is there any guidance under MGL 48, Section 6? Whereas it typically is referring to residential. I mean, is there any guidance in there that can help us apply either one of these?
No, other than the fact that 48 Section 6 is the vehicle by which the finding is required.
Right.
So you,
and it
so
has to do with residential, protection of residential.
So the answer is that, I mean, I guess it's not no for this specific purpose, but more broadly, an applicant may petition a board for a change in a pre-existing non-conforming use that began prior to the date of the adoption of the zoning bylaw that made the use illegal. So, here we have a pre-existing non-conforming use, the bowling alley, and we're seeking to expand that use by allowing the owner to have an apartment. So I think that 48 Section 6 does allow, it contemplates this, but it doesn't, as far as your specific question about dwellings introduced into businesses, that type of thing, it doesn't say anything.
What concerns me is I think that this is a slippery slope to someone who has a building on a lot that's not allowed, that has 4 3-bedroom apartments. And they come to us and say, there's 25 people living there, I want to split it, and it's non-conforming. I want to change it to 4 single-family homes, which would have to go before the planning board typically. And we find that that's less detrimental.
But Anthony, that's exactly what you said to the last or one of the last applicants, that you know, every application is dealt with on its own merits. You're not establishing
100
a precedent. And that situation that you hypothetically brought up is very different than the situation that I have
I
here.
know, but it's very similar in that a lot of people would have a very good argument that we're taking away the powers designed for the planning board. And, well, sometimes I would like to, I'm very conscious to not. I get myself in enough trouble.
I'd love to just have a bit of a straw poll, because based upon the straw poll, on the 2 out of 3 vote, it might sway me.
Just to clarify for a minute, I'm not saying I would vote that this is substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. I'm just giving you my opinion on what the code says. Do I think that I don't think it's substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. I'm just not sure that my voting that it's not gets you where you need to be.
I understand.
Yeah.
Is there anyone in the audience who wants to comment? Yay or nay?
Could I have a minute?
Sure.
Which is not.
And I want to apologize, I did take this application out of order, and I didn't intend to. I apologize.
This is my first of being here tonight, and I'm happy to be here tonight.
Just on the record, I'm gonna be the guy that presents an application down there. I just. It's painful.
Yeah, I agree.
But.
I'm sorry, I had to confer with my client.
Thank you.
but-
Perfectly acceptable.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Do you have any insights for us, or?
Well, I mean, it was an interesting question, and I'm more than happy to spell it out to the board. And really, what Doug is saying to me is, well, I'm happy to close the bowling alley tomorrow if it gets us where we need to go. And, you know, he'll consider doing something else with the building. And
But as long as the building's used for anything other than,
I recognize, and so that's something that we'll talk about. And by no means do I mean it to be threatening
Oh, no.
or anything like that. There's just a bit of a general frustration. This building's been owned since 1985. Doug has spent nights over there in the office. It has water service. It's not like you're converting. I'm aware of a couple of properties that have outdoor garages that have apartments without water uses, and they're not considered to be dwellings because there's no water in the building. And, you know, I think that this situation could be easily distinguished from other slippery slope arguments as they come along, because every situation is actually different. But
I totally
in all due
understand,
respect.
and I think, and just to speak to your client directly for a minute, I think it would be crazy, and I don't use that word very lightly, I think it would be crazy if the town felt that you shouldn't or couldn't do what you want to do with your property in this instance. I think you should absolutely be allowed, and I don't think it has any detriment to the town whatsoever. My concern is, I don't think I'm allowed to give you permission to do that as a member of this board.
well, here's a thought.
Please. I
Under
wish I was.
Under 820, can't we issue a finding that it's not more detrimental? But that may not get you the building permit. It may support the application for the accessory dwelling permit, but it doesn't necessarily get you the building permit. Our decision might still need to be supported by the special permit from the planning board.
I'm not sure what Bob thinks about that. What do you think about that, Bob?
I don't know.
Don't put me on the spot.
I think I may have already by
No, it's
letting
a-
so many cats out of the
Yeah, I
bag.
know, it's an interesting question. Clearly, if, Jeff and I did speak about this, but obviously we didn't speak in the requisite amount of depth. There's several stages to getting a building permit, and certainly your decision that this is not substantially more detrimental would have weight. I guess my question would be to the planning board or to the town planner initially, or perhaps to Brad Washburn, whether or not their opinion was this needed to go before the planning board.
Yeah, I'm not gonna stand in my ground if they think it doesn't.
No,
Well,
but-
100%.
wasn't this already circulated to the planning board for a referral comment? And did they have any comments?
No, we received nothing.
So,
Okay, I didn't know that.
In every
but
Yeah,
they
no,
commented
you're
on
right.
the sign pretty extensively.
But this, I think the sign was brought directly to them by the fire chief. You know that if I knew
Going-
that they had already that they had actually looked at
Going
it.
to the planning board is
Wouldn't
gonna
bother me.
cost a small business owner in this town over $10,000 easily, and at least 3 months with the planning board.
But hear me out. The Board of Appeals may, by a finding under General Law 48, Section 6, authorize a non-conforming use to be changed to a specified use not substantially different in character. We can make that decision.
Yes.
It doesn't
my concern is
necessarily get the
This
permit.
use isn't non-conforming.
No,
That's what-
but we're not asking for we're asking for, to a specified use. It doesn't say that it has to be non-conforming,
I like
it just
it.
has to be less,
Done.
it has to be substantially, not substantially different in character.
Let's do it. Let's
It's
make the
human beings are in
finding.
the space, they are able to do things, we make the finding.
Or not substantially more
And,
detrimental.
right, but I'm comfortable that I could make that finding. I don't know that that gets you a building permit.
Well, I think that,
And at that point,
That's-
it becomes the applicant's path to discuss it with the town planner or
or not, and proceed
Rather-
as they
I
wish.
think-
I mean, at the end of the process, before a building permit is issued, planning has to sign off along with every other department.
Right.
So
And I wouldn't expect that it would need to, that our decision would need to be appealed. It just would, the planning would need to say, well, we can't sign off on this because we need to issue a special permit as well.
however, at that point, the applicant has gone down the path of creating architectural engineering drawings. More time, more money has been spent. That's the downside of that particular path.
But it's conceivable that the planning board may consider this application before our board, and an affirmative finding under 820 to be a compelling reason to not feel that they have to review it.
Right, or that the town planner more specifically would consider it, and not bring it before the board.
Right.
Possible.
That's
We're not-
an avenue, and.
We're not taking away any, we're not granting a building permit, we're simply making a path to a building permit, which, as you say, has to eventually have planning board review as well.
Mhm.
And if they choose not to review it, or the town planner chooses not to review it,
Yeah, all true.
Sounds good to me.
I think, Tom.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it where, so the bowling alley is a non-conforming use.
To a specified use. I follow you.
So, but you're only changing part of it, right?
Well, but the office portion of the bowling alley is a wholly subordinate activity to the bowling alley.
I'm just wondering if
It
you,
supports it.
There's another way of looking at it.
How many?
I'm wondering if you're even looking at the right. So under 820, there's the
820.
last paragraph. And the only real difference between the last paragraph and the first paragraph is that the last paragraph talks about pre-existing non-conforming uses, and the first paragraph says you may authorize a non-conforming use to be changed. So under the last paragraph of section 820, you could issue a permit under that paragraph, provided that there's and this is an alteration, not a change. So the first paragraph has to do with a change in right? Authorize a non-conforming use to be changed. And the last paragraph authorizes a pre-existing non-conforming use to be extended or altered. So you could do it under either, I suppose. We're not changing, we're still keeping the bowling alley. We're altering the use by allowing the owner to live on the top floor. So that's probably where you can come at it, I'm thinking. Not to make it more confusing.
But in either case, I'm not sure that that necessarily gets you to the.
I understand.
permit Without,
Yeah.
because you do have planning board consideration. And I'm on Anthony's side here. I don't think we want to be construed in any way of trying to usurp authority of the special permit granting authority of the planning board with respect to accessory dwellings.
The planning board's gonna look at a building permit for this, and we're gonna get in trouble, right?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm on record right now as saying the planning board has a right to look at it. They may
I'm
not.
with you, and I need to learn more about the planning board hearings and submittal process, because I don't see how this submittal to the planning board should take any longer than one of the first 3 applications that we saw tonight.
That would be,
I think
I would be
Jeff
so
would
happy to be wrong about that.
I think Jeff would be the chair of my planning board election committee.
But I think that
the planning board is a very thoughtful and diligent board.
Yeah.
They're
It's,
a good board, but their process is just different.
Right.
That's
Okay.
all. I'm with you. I think that they come to the same, to the conclusion that it's allowed.
Right.
I just opted for this path.
Yeah. Well,
Because it's a little easier for me personally.
Well, everybody gets their own vote. I rely a lot on my fellow board members, and if they think it's appropriate for us to find whether or not this is more detrimental, I don't have a problem with that whatsoever.
I don't have a problem under 820 making a finding. And I think that but I reiterate, I'm not intending to grant a building permit in this respect, because there is that question.
You don't have the authority to grant building permit.
Right. We kind of kick it down the road to Bob, and Bob has to go through his process to decide whether or not this is an appropriate structure to be built in and everything else. And that includes planning board. To the degree of what we're being asked to do under 820, I think we can do it.
I think so too.
Any comments from the audience? Bob, speak now or forever hold your peace.
Well, not really.
No.
Yeah.
No to both of those.
I have one question. Jeff, just when you were talking about the bottom of 820 there, extended or alteration of the use. Is it your understanding that an alteration would be a change or a different use? See, I'm just having a problem. I'm having a problem with the top one.
Tom, I've been a zoning lawyer for, I don't know how long now, 17 years or something. The answer to that question is probably found in an analysis of like 150 different cases.
Roger that.
It's a very complex area, and the way I kind of simplify it in my mind is that change, extension, and alteration are all covered. So it kind of is the whole thing. But there clearly should be a distinction if the state law uses change, alter, and extend. As far as this zoning bylaw is concerned, I don't know
Right.
what anybody intended when they drafted this.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that anybody really has any conversation about it, you know? But I think that because it says all three, you know, you're covered, so to speak.
Right.
Motion? You ready for a motion, or?
Yeah, I'm just having difficulty with it up top, and then up top says changed.
You're on 820?
Yeah.
The use
You-
may be changed to a
Non-conforming-
specified
right.
use. Whereas below it's,
You're changing
a
part
finding,
of
a
the
finding
use.
to alter, extend or alter.
Well, and if they're not changing, then they don't need to be here at all, right?
Why don't we can we just find that the application, as proposed to convert the existing, non-conforming office space portion of the, bowling alley to a residence for the owner's use is, not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood, nor injurious to the neighborhood than the existing use.
Was that your motion? You say yes.
I would make that motion.
Seconded.
All
Did
in
you get it?
favor?
No.
No,
You didn't, she
So-
didn't get it, sorry.
So before you,
both.
Oh, please.
Go ahead.
I know what you meant, Ed. What you said, I think, was that the office use is non-conforming. And I think what you meant to say is to change or extend or whatever the pre-existing non-conforming bowling alley use, or the third,
They said the office portion of the bowling alley. the
office portion of the
non-conforming.
non-conforming
bowling
bowling alley. That's what it should say,
Move that the board find
yeah.
that the proposal to alter the existing office portion of the non-conforming bowling alley use to a residential use for the property's owner is not more detrimental or injurious to the neighborhood than the existing
You want
non-conforming
to say
use.
substantially more detrimental.
Substantially more detrimental than the existing non-conforming use.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded? All in favor?
Aye.
Nay.
Okay.
6-1.
Thank you all very much. This was a great discussion, and I'm not sure it gets me anywhere, but I just wanted to say thanks to all three of you. And I completely understand your positions, so, thank you.
If you end up before the planning board, please let me know. I would love to be there.
If it's of any
Because
help, I'd
we're
be
not
happy
just
to.
saying that because we want to help your clients out. I don't think that this is more detrimental to the neighborhood, and I'd be more than willing to explain that to other board members in town.
That's great, thank you, will do, if we're there. And I have to stay here for the next application, and you know what, that wasn't 5 minutes, I guess I was completely off.
Sometimes we're never sure. Anyway, and I do apologize, I did take it out of order. It just, I was scribbling in here and missed it. Our fifth application is of Stephen and Mary Louise Bond of P.O. Box 635, Dover, Mass. Request a finding in accordance with the Scituate zoning bylaw, section 810.2, 950.2D, and/or Mass General Laws, Chapter 40A, Section 6, and/or any other relief the Board of Appeals may grant if the alteration or extension of pre-existing conforming single-family residential dwelling on pre-existing non-conforming lot at 25 Circuit Avenue, Scituate, Mass., Assessors Map 51, Block 1, Parcel 10, will not be substantially more detrimental or injurious to the neighborhood than the existing structure.
Okay, so, sorry for all the verbs and adjectives and everything else. So, this is a gross living area increase of 4%. The addition is in the rear of the property and is set, and the closest part of the proposed addition to the rear property line is almost 80 feet. Every portion of the proposed addition is within the building envelope and completely dimensionally conforming. It's only gonna be 1 story. The issue is that under section 810.2, provided there's no more than 20% increase in gross living area, Bob could make the call to issue a building permit without requiring zoning in 2 instances. The first instance is if you have a dimensionally conforming building but insufficient lot area or frontage. And the other instance is if you have if you have a dimensionally non-conforming building with sufficient lot area or frontage. And we don't fit squarely in each of those boxes because we're dimensionally non-conforming and we have insufficient lot frontage and lot width, insufficient lot width. This is a building that was built in 1920 approximately, according to the assessors. Was laid out on a plan that pre-existed adoption of zoning. I think 1922 was the date of the plan. So I'm just looking for a finding under the last paragraph of section 810.2 to allow us to apply for a building permit.
I'll need the planning board on this one.
For the audience, the last paragraph is, in all other instances of alteration, reconstruction, extension, or structural change of a single or two-family dwelling, the applicant may petition the Board of Appeals for a finding under General Laws 48, Section 6, to allow the proposed repair, alteration, reconstruction, extension, or structural change. And you wouldn't be before us except that you can't fit into the exclusions.
Yeah, exactly.
And yet what you're asking to do is relatively insignificant in light of the size of the structure that's there, et cetera. And you're not creating any, you're staying within all setbacks. You're not creating, you're not further encroaching. There's no, yeah.
I got nothing. I'm good.
Bob?
Yeah, I'm good. I think, it would be nice if the zoning bylaws were rewritten in this area as well. You shouldn't have to, exclude. It seems to me that all of the exclusions spoken about should be in one section.
Mm.
And they should all apply equally across the board, and therefore a project like this would not need action by the Zoning Board of Appeals. But so be it.
This is a good one. This is a good bylaw that could use some wording.
A little tuning.
Updating.
Yeah.
Yeah, if
Because
you're
we
under
have-
20% and it's, and the addition's within the envelope, that should be the end of it.
Should be a no-brainer.
Exactly right.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And I just didn't want to get myself in a situation where we built an addition and then
No, I'm
Somebody
with
had
you.
a
I think
problem
you gotta
with it
be
after it
here
was
and
done.
We gotta,
And unfortunately, we're not in the position to be able to change our bylaws. We have to, that's a town meeting issue. But
Yeah.
this is definitely one that's come up a number of times that could be tweaked. Are there any comments from the audience? Speaking in favor or opposed? Motion?
Wanna do it?
Sure.
on the application of Stephen and Mary Louise Bond, the application of 25 Circuit Ave, that the board find that the lot is pre-existing non-conforming as it relates to lot frontage and lot width, and that the proposed addition on the plan drawn by Ross Engineering, 25 Circuit Ave, August 21st, 2018, that said addition is not substantially detrimental, and that we grant the finding.
Second.
Seconded.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
So if you'd like, I can take a first stab at both zoning decisions, if that's what you want.
Be
Thank you very much.
very much appreciated.
All right.
Our plan's helpful for your purposes. I'm happy to give you this back instead of just looking at it.
Oh, I have my.
Never say that, it's paper.
I'll take it out.
You should, that should be the other thing. You guys should just take digital stuff now.
That would be a nice thing,
Yeah.
but it's really hard, on plans, it's really hard to read some of the digital stuff because.
Thank you very
Jeff,
much.
I always appreciate
Yes.
the intellectual conversations. It's,
It's nice to do it in a kind of a casual fashion, so, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
is there any other business before the board? Do we have any minutes or?
Yeah, Annie had minutes, she wanted me to take care of it, she did. I don't know what I did with them. Give them to you. All right, we can do it at the next meeting, it's no problem.
All right.
All right,
Motion to adjourn?
I'd just like to thank Susan Tice as our new secretary. And I think this is our first meeting altogether, just with Annie not here. We did the
Right.
Herringbrook,
Herringbrook,
but this is
right.
our first regular meeting. And welcome aboard.
Thank you.
We hope it's not too burdensome.
Oh, it's interesting.
It is that. We have a motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.